Yep, okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's now 7 p.m. and I'd like to start the meeting of the General Services Committee. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Apologies for absence. I don't believe we've received any. We're all here. Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the General Services Committee held on the 7th of February 2023 to be approved as a correct record. Does any member have any comment on the minutes? Is everyone in agreement? Thank you. Item 3, urgent items of business. I've not agreed to any items of urgent business. Item 4, declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare a declaration of interest? No, thank you. Item 5, terms of reference. I'd like to direct members to the General Services Committee's terms of reference set out on page 9 to 12 of the agenda. Does any member wish to comment? No? All happy with that? Okay, so item 6. For this item, we go into exempt session, and I would ask any members of the public or press to leave the chamber now and for the recording to stop. Okay, thank you, and I'd like to welcome back the public to the next item on the agenda, which is Pay Policy 2023-24, and I'd ask for Jackie Hinchcliffe to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll assume everyone who's read the report, but I think there's some key parts to pick out. Just to remind the committee, so when we took the pay policy for 23-24 through Council at the beginning of March, that pay policy did not include a pay increase for senior officers, as additional work had been requested to enable us to reach a conclusion about the most appropriate pay increase for senior managers. That work has been undertaken. There's information within the report that provides you with salaries within comparative councils. It compares the pay increases that have been applied in Thurrock compared to national awards since 2019-20, and it sets out 4 options within the report. I think it's worth commenting on the 4 options. Option A is to pay the recommended 4%. So people who are familiar with our pay policy is we are local agreement. We are not linked to national pay awards. And our pay assessment is undertaken by an independent organisation, and we receive a recommendation each year. That recommendation was received and was in line with the recommendation for the general staff group, and the paper is included as an appendix and recommended a 4% pay increase. That's conducted on a market assessment of the roles that form our senior management cohort in the organisation, and they're assessed in line with the policy against a comparison of the unitary authorities and also London boroughs. So that's option A. Option B is proposing 3.5%. This actually reflects a national award that has now been accepted by chief officers nationally. At the current time, the 3.5% offered to chief executives across the country, that has still been rejected, but the chief officers have accepted 3.5. Other options within the report are to apply a lower than 3.5% increase. The example used is 2%, but obviously any offer below 3.5% can be considered. And the final option is to offer no pay increase whatsoever to senior managers. The associated benefits and risks of each of those options is set out within the report, and essentially what we need the committee to determine is the pay increase it wishes to make to senior officers for the current pay year. Once that's determined, that recommendation, if needed, will go back to council next month. Am I still in June? Yeah, next month, as an amendment to the council's pay policy in year. So it's not a decision, it's a recommendation from General Services Committee to full council, as that's where the accountability for agreeing the pay policy rests. That summarised the options and the content of the report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm just going to make a comment more than a question to begin with. The bit that I'm struggling with this is under option A. It says the 4% increase could be seen as a reward for organisational failure. My struggle with this is any reward could be seen, any increase could be seen as a reward for organisation failure. So I'd put that out there now before I ask for others to comment on the report. Councillor Spillman, you had your hand up.
Given the conclusions, the stark conclusions in the BVI, that make it clear that it wasn't just about finances, it was about every single major project we'd taken on. Given the issue with the bins over the last year and 2 years, which is a basic function of any local authority, I find it very hard to think that any councillor, and I've been asked for my input into councillor allowances as well as chair of PTR. I don't need to go to that meeting because it's a simple answer, 0%. And I can't think of any senior manager or any councillor who can really make a strong, coherent argument for a pay increase in this authority. Now, I'm willing to listen to argument around option C while I'm wrong, but it's going to have to be pretty convincing. I mean, that is my position on this. Like Councillor Jeffrey says, if you say 4% is a reward, then so is any pay increase. And we're not talking about a cohort of people that are struggling with the cost of living here, are we? The other point is that every penny we don't spend on senior management pay is a penny that we don't have to cut from other services, or that we can increase the wages of staff who truly had no influence on the failings that have been laid in the BVI.
Thank you, Councillor Spillman. Anyone else like to comment? Sorry. Councillor Kent.
So I've read the report, I've done what's been asked and wanted for, and considered the various issues, happy to note the commitment to a wider review of pay, but it does come down to that kind of fundamental, which is pay increase. And as much as I hate to think of anyone with inflation running at 8%, 10% per year, getting no increase at all, I do worry about the wider signal that it sends if we agree to any increase. So I find myself agreeing with Councillor Spillman that option D would be my favoured option.
Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be one of those councillors that Councillor Spillman didn't know existed, I think. I get it, I really do. I can see the message it sends to the wider body out in Thurrock that we're rewarding failure with any sort of a pay rise. But we are in special circumstances, and from my experience, the officers that are here now, the senior officers that are here now, are working all the hours and putting in a huge amount of work to try and drag this authority around and put it back in a fit position to go into the future and become a successful authority. I think the risk of not giving a reasonable increase is that we demotivate the staff that are already here, and it negates our ability to employ other staff that want to come into the authority that we might well need, good people to come in to help us with that recovery. So I think, you know, whilst I completely understand where that sort of no pay rise idea comes from, or at least a very low pay rise, I would be minded to still not go the full whack, but I'll be minded for something like a 3%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Snell. Councillor Kent and then Councillor Worrell. Councillor Worrell.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm sort of in between the devil and the deep blue sea, and that there's a bit of both that I think is right. But then I'm thinking that we're in a position now that we need to reshape Thurrock and a new directors board. You know, we know that there's going to be a new strategy for what the directors board looks like, and that we're going to need to be able to attract people that want the challenge of turning Thurrock around. So I think that whilst I don't see anybody at the top of the tree struggling to pay their gas and electric over the next year, I still expect that they have got increased costs because you live to your means, I guess. But I do want to be able to attract people that are in the top quartile of, you know, I want people to come to Thurrock. I want them to feel that we do have a good pay structure. I don't think it should be 4%. I don't think it should be 0%. I think that I would be leaning to 2% is where I feel. I don't think that we should give nothing, because nobody deserves to get nothing. But at the same time, I don't think that there's some that, if you could just pick and choose who got it, that would be fine, but you can't pick and choose who gets it. So you need to attract, I want to be able to attract people and reward people that have stayed when actually I'm sure that they're getting interest to go and work elsewhere. So I think that, for me, I think it's, I would say 2%.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. And what I would add to that is I hope the good ones that we're talking about aren't getting interest somewhere else and will stay with us. Councillor Kent.
I think it's really important that we, Councillor Snell did acknowledge that there are a lot of people putting in a lot of hours and a lot of hard work, and I think we do all acknowledge that. I have, you know, real admiration for the men and women that are actually on the front line, though. Those who are emptying the bins and sweeping the streets and cutting the grass and looking after our vulnerable elderly, looking after our vulnerable children. And I think that it's important that we make sure that those people are properly rewarded for what they do, because what's happened here, the catastrophe that's happened, is absolutely nothing to do with those people. But I think that part of being a senior leader in local government means that you do lead by example, and when things have gone as wrong as they have, that you say, actually, I'm not going to accept an increase this year. You know, I am going to sit tight on what I've got. And I think we have to acknowledge that many of our senior leadership team now are interims that aren't going to be bound by this anyway. That when Dr. Smith has completed his new structure and we go out to the market, we might be able to go out on different terms and conditions and different pay rates anyway. So I don't think it will prevent us from going out and finding good people. But I think just for that show of leadership, we should be saying that for the most senior people, and it is only the most senior people, an increase just isn't the responsible or appropriate thing to do this year.
Councillor Arnold.
I can really understand everybody's point of view, what Councillor Kent has said there, but I really do feel akin with Councillor Worrell. I think it's really difficult, and there have been some exceptional stepping up of people and hours, and we shouldn't be penalising everybody for our feelings of ill against some that maybe haven't stepped up and worked so well. So I think 2% kind of sits in the middle of saying we recognise that there's some great works going, that it helps us keep that balance of being next to London and attracting the right calibre of people going forward. And I don't want to not recognise those people that have really, really stepped up.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else? No.
So if it's helpful, I'll move that we agree 1.1 to 1.4, we agree 1.6, and I will move option D for 1.5.
Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Spillman. All those in favour? Oh. Agreed.
Sorry, Chair, can you just confirm that you did also agree, so you've agreed 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5? Was the vote? Yeah, okay, no, that's clear, thank you, that's fine. If you want to move on to the next item, Chair, that's fine.
Thank you. So item 8, pay and reward review. Over to Jackie Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. This report is brought to General Services Committee as a follow-up to the amendment to the pay policy discussion in January of this year, where we had to revise last year's pay policy. As part of that, the committee committed to a pay review with a view to aiming to mitigate some of the additional costs that are being placed on the pay budget. As the committee knows, the pay budget is the biggest cost to the council, and by having to implement the 1,925 flat rate increase that was applied nationally last year, that placed an additional £2 million of pressure on the budget. In anticipation, that position has been recommended again in the current financial year nationally, although hasn't been agreed and where there's potentially about dispute. But as part of that mitigation process, General Services Committee asked us to scope and bring back a timeline for conducting that review. That scope and timeline is presented in this report, and I just need the committee to confirm that they're happy with it, and we can then commission the resources to drive the initial phase of diagnostics with a view to bringing back proposals in September.
Thank you. I've just got one question, and that is to do with 1.2, the immediate cessation of all discretionary payments. I wonder if you could just explain that a little bit more to the committee as to exactly what that is and whether that will affect those already in receipt of additional discretionary payments, please. The
scope of the discretionary payments is quite limited. We do have some discretion within some of our policies to, for example, prolong the payment of sick pay. So sick pay would normally run out at 6 months. Directors can agree for that sick pay to continue under certain circumstances. The other example that we have is there's pile-on paid on occasions for ill health retirement. The numbers of these are not high. They're not going to solve the financial challenge, but in terms of actually making sure we cease paying what at the moment is discretionary to just provide some savings before we do the full diagnostic. It's recommended to the General Services Committee as a consideration.
Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Kent.
So I'm happy to agree the scope and time scale of the pay and reward review, and I'm happy to review the review of performance management council-wide. I'm not happy with the immediate cessation of all discretionary payments, purely because there's not enough information in this report for me to be able to make that decision. We don't know how many people might be affected, we don't have the full scope of those discretionary payments, and we don't have a figure for how much that's currently costing us. And until I can see that, that's not something I can agree to.
Councillor Spillman.
I agree on the discretionary payments. I mean, there are a lot of times that our officers go into harm's way in certain areas of our work, and there could be an example where one of our officers is injured, harmed, but has a recovery that will bring him back to work within perhaps the extended period of time. To take away a discretionary payment in this circumstance would seem to be cruel at best, to be honest.
Any other member wanting to speak? Okay, so I would like to recommend that we accept 1.1 and 1.3. Councillor Kent, with the 1.2, you'd like further information on that? Bring it back, and then that. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, if that can come back to a future meeting with a more complete report, then I'd be happy to consider it.
Thank you. So I've got agreement on 1.1 and 1.3. Yeah, agreed. Okay, thank you. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I now declare the meeting closed at 7:30. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your evening.